Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are going through an exhaustive history of my gaming journey, I suppose. A full timeline. Every game I've ever loved. Okay, that's obviously not true, but this is a lot of the games that I put a lot of time into and a lot of the sort of categories of games that I have fallen in and out of love with over time. So I thought this would be fun. Give you a sense of where I come from, where I'm going, what my game tastes are, what games I liked. There may be some surprises in here for those that watch the channel, stuff you might not have expected me to play. And in general, who doesn't love data and a little bit of nostalgic reflection, right? Nostalgia is what it's all about. So before I kick it off, I do want to say this video was inspired by a very similar video that FemTrooper put out. So I'll leave a link in the description to her video and her channel. Great video you should go check out, and a great channel that I highly recommend that you dig through the back catalog for, because it's very good. But why don't we just go ahead and kick right over to the timeline. So what I've done here is I have built a timeline of the major, kind of the milestone games in my life, and in some sections where one game really isn't applicable, I have instead sort of broadly categorized them. And if I'm being honest, this idea was not entirely born out of just the desire to make this video. I actually built this timeline back in 2019 before I was ever really making YouTube videos in any meaningful way. I think I had one Game of the Year video up. But I made this back with some friends of mine in 2019 just for the fun of it, because this is the type of thing that I like to do. So all I really did is I came in, made some tweaks to it, kind of adjusted some things, fleshed out the last few years, which didn't take much effort. And we're going to kind of go through it together and see where I come from and what my gaming journey is overall. So we start in the early 90s. I don't actually know if it's 92 or 93 when I really started playing games, but right around there is where all this kicked off. And it was all thanks to my Sega Genesis. So I have told this story in various contexts on podcasts and possibly even on the channel before. But for those who are new, those who are unaware, it was either Christmas of 92 or Christmas of 93. And it was midnight. And my sister, who's several years older than me, she snuck down into my room, or snuck up into my room at the time, and woke me up, and she's like, "Hey, Santa's come. Santa's here. Let's go open those presents." I'm 5 years old at the time. So we went out, and I, at midnight with my sister, opened up my presents, and the kind of the big gift, the main keystone gift, was a Sega Genesis in box with Sonic 2. It was the bundle version that had Sonic 2 packed in. And so my sister helps me to get it all set up. She hooks it up to our CRT tube TV at the time in the living room. And from 1 in the morning until 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning, until my parents wake up, I just play Sega the whole time. I play Sonic 2 the whole time. And I don't think I got any other games. So I think it was just me obsessively playing Sonic 2. And then my parents woke up, they came out, and we had to kind of be like, "Oh, we just woke up an hour ago. We just got this going." Although I'm 5, I'm sure they did not believe me and saw right through me. But that is what kicked it off. And then for years, I was a Sega kid. I have Lion King listed here too alongside the Sonic games, because those were sort of the main ones. But I would kind of lump my gaming in these early years, in my elementary years, into whatever I got, right? I liked Sonic. And then beyond that, I liked the games based on movies that I watched, Disney movies. So I played Lion King, I played Aladdin, stuff like that. And then I had some stuff like Pac-Man and some various other games, but I really didn't have taste. I wasn't really, I don't know, I wasn't really seeking games out. I didn't have gaming magazines. I didn't have friends that were really into games. And so at this point in my life, and again, I'm 7, so this is reasonable. But at this point in my life, I don't know what I like yet. I'm sort of just given gifts of games. I know I want games, but I don't know what games I want. And so really during this time, I'm playing the Sega Genesis that I got. And at the time, I'm also poking at my sister had an NES, so I'm playing some Contra and some Mario and stuff. Those are there too, but that was her system. I don't really think of that as my roots. It was sort of ancillary. But But I'm poking at some other stuff too. Zumbini's Logical Journey. This is a game I played in elementary school. It's a great puzzle game, actually. It's a lot of fun. It's still fun. Very cowl. Putt Putt Saves the Zoo. Got to get those classic Putt Putt games when you're a young kid. Come on now. And then Chips Challenge, which was a pack-in on our PC, on our family computer in my mom's bedroom. An old, I don't know, at that point it was probably a Windows 98 or something. I don't remember. But Chips Challenge, which was a really good puzzle game. There's actually a port for the Atari Lynx. I highly recommend you pick that up if you are also nostalgic about Chips Challenge. And yeah, so it really was just kind of like my Genesis and then whatever was on the PC. I have Pandora's Box here a little bit later, which, for those that don't know, is like a Alexei Pajitnov puzzle game, if I'm recalling correctly. But my mom played that obsessively. It's like the only game she liked, that and Mario Kart. And so I'm sort of nostalgic about that one. But it is not until we get down into this era right here, Super Mario 64. When I got the Nintendo 64, now I'm in, 4th, 5th grade, and I get my Nintendo 64, and with Super Mario 64, it kicks off my love of platformers. In fact, it was funny. I remember my sister for a year or two, she had a Nintendo 64 and I didn't. And so she would bring her Nintendo 64 over to our house. She had moved out by this point. She's like 10 years older than me. And she would bring it over to our house and let me play it. And she had Mario 64 and I think Mario Kart and stuff like that. And I remember one day I was in like a terrible, grumpy elementary school kid mood. I don't remember why. I was pouting. And my sister had hooked up the Nintendo 64, and my mom and my sister are downstairs, and they call me down, and they say, "Come down. Hey, come down, man. Steve." So I come down, and I'm like, grumpy boy. And Mario 64 is set up on the CRT, which she had done before. And I'm like grumpy. I'm like, "Oh, I don't care. So what, you brought Mario 64? I don't care. I don't want to play Mario 64 right now." And they were like, "No, look closer." And I looked, and it was Mario was standing outside Peach's castle, and there was like no stars. It was a fresh save file, and the gears started turning in my head, and I was like, "Oh my god, wait!" And they're like, "Yeah, man, that's your Nintendo 64." So I guess my parents had probably bought it for, I would guess it would be for my birthday at that point, but I was in such a terrible mood they just decided like, "Hey, let's just give it to him now," which, in hindsight, I kind of feel bad about. Like, I don't want to ruin the birthday gift, but I didn't care. I was like, "Oh my god, I have a Nintendo 64." And I was obsessed with Super Mario 64. I still love that game. And it really did kick off my love for 3D platformers that goes through my entire life. I'm playing Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, everything like that. In this era, PS2 era, I'm all about that Jak and Daxter. And then, into the modern era, I play all sorts of platformers. Freaking go play Tinykin, people. But Ocarina of Time is really the big one for me, I think, in terms of like formulating my taste and like who I am. Like, what does Steve like in games? Or not even that, like it opened my eyes to the idea that games were like something that I should pursue. So I love telling this story, and apologies if you've heard it before in other videos, but I remember a lot of my stories involve me being grumpy. I was sitting in 5th grade in elementary school, and all my friends were talking about Ocarina of Time. And I had never played a Zelda game. I had never heard of a Zelda game. Remember that I grew up a Genesis kid, and I didn't have like a Nintendo Power subscription or anything like that. I really had not had the opportunity to come across any of them. But they're really obsessed with it. They're talking about it, and it's like the it thing. And I wanted to fit in with my friends. It's like, not even just to be popular. It's like when all your friends are doing something in 5th grade, you want to do that thing too. It's Pogs or Pokemon cards or Ocarina of Time. And so I got it in my head, I need Ocarina of Time. And I go home. I convince my parents to buy it for me for one reason or another. And they drive me to Target. And we pick up a copy of the game. They let me buy a copy of the game. I think I was actually originally hoping to get South Park 64, which I did later get. But I was like, I'll get Ocarina of Time. And I'm driving home from Target. Well, they're driving me home from Target. I'm in the back seat. Gosh, the street lights whipping by. I'm trying to read the box to the glow of the street lights. And I remember reading the back of the box and being like, reading about some guy named Ganondorf. And honestly, if I'm being real, the thought in my head was, this game sounds so dumb. I was like, I can't believe I have to play this stupid game in order to fit in with my friends. And I put it in when I got home and I started playing, and it was like, whoa. It was like, my eyes were opened. I was suddenly like, holy crap. Not only is this game incredible, and I had no idea, also, games can be like this. They aren't only just like a tie-in product, like a toy for like franchises and movies that I already like. Like, they can be like whole grand adventures, like seemingly endless worlds that I can go in and explore, get lost in, tons of like people to meet, places to go, things to discover. I was like, oh my God. And so, I became a lifelong Zelda fan from that point on. But really, this is when the switch flipped. This is when I went from like games are one of the things I do to like video games are now my primary hobby. This is like the thing I care about the most. And that just happened to coincide perfectly with Pokemon Red and Blue. So it's Pokemania, right? Pokemon cards, freaking Pocket Pikachus, and the Red and Blue versions on my Game Boy Color. And so this is also when I'm like getting introduced to RPGs without even knowing it, right? Like at this point, I'm playing this game that I don't even think of as an RPG. I just think of it as a Pokemon game, but I love it. I played it through a bunch of times. All my friends are playing it. I was really into the cards. I was a 90s kid, man. I can't help it. I love that Pokemon, still do. So like Pokemon plus Zelda hitting at the same time really turned me like into the right version of myself and set me on the right path. And then as we get into like the early 2000s, I really kind of got into a PC era, I would say. So we'll scooch this over a little bit here. And this stretches beyond just the early 2000s, but this is right around the time when I got my first PC. So my family was upgrading their PC. Probably it was around like 2000, 2001 or something like that. So I'd have been like, I don't know, in my teens. And they gave me their old PC. And my parents were cool, so they let me put the PC in my room. This was before the internet was maybe as scary as it is today. And so when I had a PC in my room, I was all about the Blizzard games, and actually Age of Empires 2, which if it's not on here, it should have been. But I played so much StarCraft Brood War, so much Diablo and Diablo 2 with my friends. Hundreds of hours into all three of these games. Absolutely loved the Blizzard output. And this was like my introduction to the RTS genre, which I would say is a genre that I don't really get a lot of interaction with. Like, I don't play a lot of RTS games because realistically I don't these days play a lot of PC games. It doesn't fit into my life as cleanly, especially now that I've had a son. But when I do play an RTS game, I tend to really like it, and that will become apparent as we go a little bit later on. But yeah, I'm really into the PC era, and especially if we look down here, I'll jump past GoldenEye and Perfect Dark for a second. I really get into emulation on that PC, which I know it's a dirty word, but it was and is completely fine. Play your games however you can play your games. And at the time, this was the era to emulate, I'm telling you. It was novel. It was cool. Everyone, you felt like you were a hacker when you were doing it. And so I had downloaded my SNES 9X and Nesticle and Genesis. I was on Zophar's domain and downloading everything I could. And so I would download whole libraries for consoles, especially NES and Super Nintendo, because remember, those were the systems that I didn't have any experience with growing up. And on the Super Nintendo emulator in particular, I really started getting into the RPGs. I was like, whoa, this is exactly what I want. And right around this time too is when, this is a couple years after like Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 had come out, and I had played those, and it sort of had like kickstarted my love of RPGs. But I would say it's the emulation, and specifically the Super Nintendo RPGs, that like solidified my love of the turn-based RPG. I chewed through every single one that I could. Action RPGs, turn-based RPGs, all of them. Like, I played, probably in the course of a couple years here, I played through Chrono Trigger, which is one of my all-time favorite games. Earthbound, which is one of my all-time favorite games. I played through like Illusion of Time. I poked at weirder stuff like Terranigma and Bahamut's Lagoon with their fan translations, or even without their fan translations. I played the Lufia games. I played the Breath of Fire games. And I loved all of them. And I was like, wow, this is really something I can get into. And it like sort of crystallized in my head like, oh, this is part of what made Pokemon good. Like this structure, this format really works for me. And again, a genre that I have had my ups and downs with in terms of how often I play them. At the time, I played a lot back in this era. And then I'd say that for a while, I don't play as many turn-based RPGs. And actually just recently, after the birth of my son, I'm starting to get back into them. Something about a turn-based RPG seems to fit really well in like when you have like a little nap that your kid is taking and you just want to play something relaxing and fun for like 45 minutes. I think RPGs are perfect for that. Or a couple hours after he goes to bed at night, whatever it might be. Perfect. So yeah, so I do a lot of emulating. I play some other stuff like I Want to Be the Guy, which is like a fun fan translation game that I just had a lot of a fondness for at the time. That sort of kicked off my love of hard games, stuff like Super Meat Boy and all those, like precision platformers. But then the other big thing I'm doing in this era is, even though we're stretching beyond the Nintendo 64's sort of like lifespan, a big thing that I was doing was multiplayer sessions and what would eventually become LAN parties with my friends. So if we look, we got GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. I played both of those. Played them all the time. And this was like the game that me and my buddies, every weekend we'd have sleepovers and we'd all bring our Nintendo 64 controllers and we would play, tons of rounds of GoldenEye. We'd play a bunch of rounds of Perfect Dark against bots, stuff like that. And it was like, it was so fun. I wish I could go back to an era when you could sit on a 30-inch CRT screen, split 4 ways, and not feel like you were like staring at a little tiny dot, like feeling like that was enough screen real estate. And just playing multiplayer with your friends until 2, 3 in the morning. Oh my gosh, it's so ridiculously fun. And then beyond, what that eventually turns into is Halo 1, 2, and 3 LAN parties. So we would all the time go over to my buddy's house. Shout out to Paul. And he had a setup where like his bedroom was upstairs, and then there was like a loft outside the bedroom. And in that loft outside the bedroom is another TV, like a smaller TV setup. And so we would run a LAN cable out his bedroom under the door, down the hall, into that other room. And then we would play 2v2 Halo. Usually it was on Blood Gulch or Sidewinder, Capture the Flag. And that used to be like, I was living for that at the time. I was so into it. It was like, it's the golden era, baby. The golden era of multiplayer for me is Halo 1, 2, and 3. Well, really, especially Halo 1 and 2 in those LAN parties. And then a little bit of Halo 3 as I started going into college. But yeah, loved playing that. Another game that I was very into at the time, which is a little uncharacteristic of me. If I've never talked about this, you would never expect it. But Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, me and my friend who lived down the street from me were addicted to the multiplayer in this, which is incredible, by the way. If you've never played it, it's got this asynchronous 2v2. 2 people play as mercenaries, 2 people play as spies. And we were so into it. We learned all the levels. We were like had super coordinated strategies. We knew when to split up. We knew when to work together. And we ended up climbing the leaderboards pretty high in this game. I think that we were in like the top 50 ranked people. And I mean, honestly, that was probably just because we played it so much, because we were 14 and had nothing else going on. But man, it was so fun. Got a little Donkey Kong, some Tony Hawk, some Smash Bros, just kind of classic games for kids of my era. And then things really start to change around 2004 here, under this what I've noted as random games discovery. So the big shift here is me getting my own part-time job. And I've actually done a video that covers some similar stuff to this. So you may have heard this story in that video. I'll link it either in the description, or if I can, I'll throw a card up somewhere. That was like how my gaming and collecting has changed. That one was a little more focused on collecting and a little more modern, but I think that this same story came up. So 2004, I get my part-time job, my first part-time job. I'm 16. Uh, yeah, I'm turning 16. I want to get car insurance money so I can drive, or gas money, right? I want to drive around with my friends. And the very first paycheck I ever received, this was before direct deposit. My sister picks me up. She drives me to the bank. I cash my check. It was for like $110. We drive immediately over to Circuit City, which, rip Circuit City. Pour one out for Circuit City. And I remember they had like these bins. They were like these wireframe bins that either sat, I remember them being like kind of right as you walked into the store, but also sometimes they were on the edges of the aisles. And they were filled with like the clearance games, like just random stuff that were usually marked to like $20 or less. And I go into those and I just start digging. I bought so many random games. I'm buying some kind of interesting games that I would go later in life to kind of enjoy. Stuff like, Extermination and The Summoner on PS2. Just kind of weird jank. I got some misses. I bought Prism Chapter 1, The Dark Unicorn on PS2. Not an all-time classic, but, the meme's still strong. And it brought me into my era of now that I had money. And I was like getting in more and more into games. I had the computer in my room. I had access to the internet. I can like do more research, go to different websites, even if I don't have magazine subscriptions. It's like, this is me like learning what's out there. So every time I got paid, I would go down to Funkoland or, eventually GameStop, whatever it might be. And I would just buy stuff. I would, it was all about looking at the box art, looking at the cover art, seeing what the game might be like and taking a chance on it. And that's something that I still really value, is like minimum information, taking a chance on a game. I don't like to, like when trailers come out for something, I don't like to look at too much gameplay. I don't like to know too much about the games that I'm going to play. I want to go in kind of fresh. And this was like me doing that in the most literal sense, and really sort of developing my taste for like random sort of off the beaten path type of games. So that transitions me very smoothly into my backlog. And so this is all thanks to one website, backloggery.com. I've talked about it before, but it is the default homepage of the internet for me and has been since 2008. I loved it. At this point in my life, I was already like the guy that had a lot of games. Like, in high school, it's like I had all my old games and all my new games out on a shelf in my bedroom. And at the time, I probably had like maybe 50 to 100 games. But at that point, that was a lot of games. Like 100 games was a lot of games. And so I always was into like just kind of playing everything I owned. I never really like tucked a system away or traded it out for the next one. It always just kind of like everything was additive. I was like, oh, now I have a PS1 and a PS2, stuff like that. But when I found Backloggery, it was like finding the exact website I needed at the exact right time. It's all focused on finishing your backlog, playing through your backlog of games, and tracking which ones you've finished, which ones you haven't, giving them ratings, giving them reviews, talking to other people that are playing games, and, maybe you've played stuff that you've never heard of, or you're just playing the same thing as you right now. It was kind of like community building around what was otherwise a solitary hobby, which was kind of exactly what I needed. And so I became really focused on playing through my backlog here. Like I looked at the stuff I already had and I was like, I want to beat all of these. I was still buying. I was still adding to that collection very rapidly, but I was like, now I want to finish everything I buy, which I still want to do. I still, I live in the ignorant view that I will one day finish all my games. It is an attainable goal. I just have to live to be a couple 100 years old. No big deal. Another thing that happened around this time, I actually don't have it on the bar chart, but I should mention it. Around 2010. Around 2010 is when somewhere in there, 2008 to 2011, somewhere. It's when I discover gaming on YouTube, like YouTube gaming channels. And I never had a channel of my own back in the day. And I never really commented on anybody's videos. I'd leave a like here and there, but I was sort of just like a silent observer. But I was really appreciative of everyone putting out videos talking about games that they loved. You know, there was sort of this explosion of channels, and I won't, name too many because I don't want to leave anybody out, but like, I was suddenly discovering all these retro gaming channels that were showing their pickups, doing game reviews, talking about cool games you might not have heard of on different systems. I was learning about systems I never even knew about growing up, and it like, I just started like consuming. I loved learning. I like the process of discovery really started to like balloon out from there. In fact, this random games discovery really could go well beyond 2008 because the YouTube era sort of like reinvigorated me right around then and kept me going. And I was suddenly like, yeah, there's so much cool stuff to find. If I could go back in time, I would definitely have, thrown my hat in the ring. I think I would have had stuff to say and games to share, but I was like kind of had a hang up about social media at the time. I wasn't really a big fan, and I was pretty resistant to any social media. I didn't make a Facebook account until like 2010 or something. I didn't make a Twitter for years. I wanted to not like personalize my internet experience. Like, I don't know, it just was my thing. But hindsight's 2020, and thankfully, even as a silent observer, I could appreciate all the great work that everybody put out, and all those incredible videos that gave recommendations. All right, let's go down a little bit. We get into, so now, I'm really into console games. I'm really into RPGs, platformers, stuff like that. But I do continuously fall into addictions on like specific multiplayer games. It's like, I don't play a lot of multiplayer games really, but when I do get into one, I tend to get like kind of hyper focused on it. And so the big one for me was StarCraft 2. So around 2010, I start watching StarCraft 2 on Justin TV and eventually Twitch. And, I'm watching all the tournaments. I'm watching all the like content creators talking about build orders and strategy and how to get better. I'm laddering in StarCraft 2 all the time, and all my friends are doing it too. And it just became this big, like, I wanted to get good at StarCraft 2. Did I ever get good at StarCraft 2? No, I sucked at StarCraft 2, but I liked the process of learning and growing and getting better. And when my friends started to fall off StarCraft 2, they switched to Dota 2, and I played some Dota 2 as well. I played like 600 hours of Dota 2. But I think that if I'm really looking back in hindsight, Dota 2, I was chasing the feeling of StarCraft 2 with Dota 2. I just wanted more StarCraft 2. That was really my great love in terms of like competitive multiplayer games. And then I continue to play, multiplayer stuff with my friends. Modern Warfare 1 and 2 came out. I was the exact right age to be in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. So I'm like kind of into first-person shooters in this era now. That's a genre I've really fallen off of. But in this era, it was a good time to be a first-person shooter fan. Modern Warfare 1 and 2 were so good, and so, like, they felt so innovative and so unique at the time. It wasn't like now where, I mean, even then they released tons of Call of Duty games, but now there's so many that it's like, I just kind of dip in and out occasionally. I'm still playing Pokemon games. I specifically call out Diamond and Pearl because this is the first time I got like hardcore about it, where I was EV training up an entire team, competitively battling against my friends, stuff like that. It was, that's a good era. That's probably my second favorite gen after the originals is Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. And then I get into, I do have Age of Empires 2 way back here. Interesting. I wonder why I put it so far down on the timeline, but proof. And hey, Final Fantasy X, what a great RPG. I played that one too. But we can see, if you look here, we got Guitar Hero, Rock Band, DDR, and Stepmania. I would say that this is like, if I could just group this, and actually a little bit below this, we have Osu, ITG, all these are rhythm games. So this is my rhythm game arc for sure. I started on the PS2 with DDR Max, and I was like, oh, this is really fun. And so then I ended up buying every PS2 Dance Dance Revolution game. I was super into those. And then when Guitar Hero came out, I remember a buddy of mine, he got it and invited me over to his house, and I went over and I played Guitar Hero 1 on PS2 at his house, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to be into this. And I got super into, especially once Guitar Hero 3 came out, I got super into it. I was score chasing. I was playing everything on Expert and super addicted to it. There was a website called Score Hero, which most folks may not be aware of. That was like the fan score tracking site. So there was no like leaderboards in these Guitar Hero games. And so it was fan run leaderboards. and you would upload pictures of your scores, and then they would like show, what your ranking was compared to everybody else. There were forums of people that were like the first person ever to, to full combo this song, when Through the Fire and Flames was full combo for the first time. It was a big deal on the forums, stuff like that. I was really into that in Guitar Hero 3, but then Rock Band 1 and 2 was where I got like probably my biggest addiction in games ever was Rock Band drums. I played in Rock Band 1 and 2 in particular. I played thousands of hours of drums. I was like competitively score chasing everything. I was doing all the strategies to squeeze out like tiny extra points that the game never even intended to you. I was like fighting for first place scores on a bunch of songs. I was helping someone who was like a computer science programmer at the time learn the game's timing windows so that he could develop a program that would tell people the optimal time to use their star power or their like multipliers. It was every day, all night. And it's funny because at this point I was staying up pretty late. I worked overnight shifts at a grocery store at the time, and I was still living at home. And I would play Rock Band at like 2 a.m. with my parents just sleeping upstairs, my mom asleep upstairs. And I would put socks, I'd rubber band socks to the Rock Band set because 1, it would help with the hit detection, but 2, it would muffle the sound so that I could play it until like the wee hours in the morning. And then around 2009 is when I meet my partner, now fiance, and she and I played a lot of DDR on PS2 together. And then the big thing that we played a lot of together is, I'll jump down here to In the Groove, ITG. This is like an offshoot. Basically, it's the good version of DDR once you've played it. It is folks that like forked off of and developed their own non-Konami version of Dance Dance Revolution that just to me it had better charts, better songs, and it was a little more focused on like technical performance, so it was kind of harder. I love In the Groove. I still love In the Groove. Again, most folks know at this point, but I have one of these arcade machines in my house, so I can play this game whenever I want. It is absolutely incredible. And my partner and I were also playing handheld rhythm games at this time too. We were really into Elite Beat Agents and Osu, or like Owendan, the import game on the DS. So it's just a really good time to be playing rhythm games. I tell you, just absolutely phenomenal. And I was into Beat Saber when that came out and things like that. Just so much good stuff. I have Super Meat Boy called out here because, we mentioned I Want to Be the Guy before we got those precision platformers. This was also the era of speedrunning for me. So 2013 is the first time I ever watched a Games Done Quick, and I was enraptured with the idea of speedrunning. And so Super Meat Boy was the first game I ever learned to speedrun. And I did some speedruns of that, and then I went on to do some speedruns of some other random indies, and then eventually Eco, which is not on here, but it really should have been. Eco speedruns were a big thing for me for like a year. And then we get in more towards the modern era. So at this point, I think I've sort of like captured my tastes pretty well, and I'm sort of pretty close to the modern version of myself. Big fan of platformers, big fan of RPGs. I like difficult games. I like rhythm games, stuff like that. But I always need some comfort on the side. So I ended up playing a lot of Hearthstone for years. And even when I wasn't playing it, I would watch a lot of Twitch streams of Hearthstone. Pokemon Go was a phenomenon that no one could really avoid, and I continued to play that for a long time. And then we get down into this last section here, which I've called Streaming Retro and Variety, starting in 2020. So in 2020, June, I did my first ever Twitch stream, and I really liked it. It was a lot of fun. So I continued to stream several times a week, and we grew a little community over there, and it was a lot of fun to poke at various things. But it made me it reinvigorated and doubled down on my excitement for just like the lesser loved games. You might call them jank, you might call them hidden gems, you might call them all of the above. But I liked finding stuff that I feel like not a lot of other people had brought to Twitch and showing it off. Giving people something new to go, look for or purchase on eBay, or just a new game to add to their wish list brings me a lot of happiness. And so it was around 2020 that I'd say that really, really, doubled once streaming started. And I was already like that. I'd been like that for years, as we've talked about here, but this just gave me like a platform to share it with people. And actually, it was after streaming that I decided to start making more YouTube videos too. So, I liked the idea of talking with other like-minded people, and I thought, you know what, why not? So that brings us all the way through to today. I don't stream as often as I once did. Again, I have a son now, so my time is a little bit more limited, but I do at least squeeze in one stream a week, and I'll do more when I can. But I want to keep consistent with that as much as I can, because I think that it both like kind of keeps me grounded in the types of games that I like to play, whether it's indies or retro or weird stuff. And also it's a good opportunity to keep my passion alive in terms of talking to other people that care about games just as much as I do. So yeah, there's your breakdown, your full timeline. Here, we'll zoom over again, and we'll zoom up. That's everything from age 4 to age now. So thank you so much if you stuck all the way around for this entire video. Hopefully it was interesting to you. It's interesting to me. I love looking back like this. And there's so many games I left out that I could have included in this. And if I made the same timeline again, some of these would be here, but other stuff would resurface. So this is not everything I cared about. This is just the stuff off the top of my head that I knew I had some time, some good time spent with, and what made me the current game lover that I am. So thanks everyone. I will talk to you again in another video. If you liked this, please go ahead and leave a like on it, and share with me what your big games were. What games did you put thousands of hours into? Were you a World of Warcraft person? Were you an MMO person? I'd love to know. So thanks again for watching, and until next time, peace.